You may have noticed that American schools seem increasingly dysfunctional, many of them. Some are getting more dangerous. But you may not know that a federal policy is part of the reason. Several years ago, the Obama administration ordered schools to eliminate racial gaps in school discipline. They didn't say how to do this. It was like the old Soviet potato harvest. Just do it. Get the numbers up. And so schools complied in many cases simply by cutting back on discipline itself. The result, fewer students were suspended. On the other hand, schools across the country have seen fighting in the hallways and disorder in the classroom. That's real. Now, the Trump administration reportedly is planning to scrap that Obama-era rule. Heather McDonald is one of the people who's been following this from the very beginning. She's at the Manhattan Institute. She's a fellow and the author of the book, The War on Cops, and joins us tonight. Heather, thanks for coming on. This is one of those policies that got a little bit of attention, but people didn't focus on it until the Parkland shooting, and it seemed implicated in that. Tell us what this did, this policy.
Well, it penalized schools that had disparate rates of school discipline on the theory that the only possible reason why black students may be suspended at higher rates than white students is teacher bias. And so schools were warned by the Obama administration that they would lose federal funding. They were taken to court unless they got their suspension and expulsion rates down. And so, as you say, Tucker, schools simply stopped imposing completely legitimate consequences on very serious forms of school disorder. Now, the premise underlying this Obama policy was completely false. It assumes, without even trying to prove, that there can be no behavioral disparities between black and white students. Well, if you look at crime rates, if you look at the fact that black males between the ages of 14 and 17 commit homicide at 10 times the rate of white and Hispanic male teens combined, it's not surprising that in the classroom, the same lack of socialization that leads to those wildly disproportionate rates of violent crime is also affecting student behavior. And we should be concerned about that behavior, try to get at its root causes, and not blame teachers for the completely phantom, specious idea that they're racist.
Well, that's kind of exactly the point. One, this was not a science-based conclusion. It was purely ideological and not rooted in reality at all. Two, it doesn't help anybody to say, just change the numbers and ignore the root causes. Why did teachers' unions, teachers were, as you said, effectively blamed for this. Yes. Why didn't they fight back?
It's very curious. In some places they have. In Seattle they have. I believe in St. Paul. I think teachers are completely torn. I mean, this is another reason why it's so ludicrous to blame them for racism. Teacher ed schools are one long marinade in white privilege theory. There's no more liberal group of professionals in the country than teachers. And so they want to, in a sense, believe in their own white privilege, and yet they will not speak out against the consequences of this. You have a rain of assaults against teachers in this country. In Buffalo, New York, a teacher was kicked in his head by students who said, "We can't be suspended." Students know what the new rules are, and they are taking advantage of it.
That's just horrifying. And finally, did anybody, I mean, like so many social policies, they kind of take place sub rosa and the rest of us don't really notice. Did anyone complain about this at the time? It's so prima facie crazy, you'd think someone would. Did anyone?
Well, there's a very brave black teacher in St. Paul, Aaron Benner, who opposed as strongly as he could the very left-wing radical policies of the St. Paul School District and said, I am not helping my black students by winking at their school violence, because you know what's going to happen. They're going to end up raping or murdering somebody, and they'll end up in prison. And he basically had to leave his school for speaking truth to power.
It's grotesque, because you're exactly right. It does no service to the kids themselves. Heather, thank you for that.
Thank you.
I appreciate it. That was amazing.